Hello, thanks for checking out this video. Today I want to talk a little bit about capitalism, birth rates, marriage, sex, and the male loneliness epidemic. Now in my last video I was expressing that I, as an elder millennial, I'm 39, feel a lot of sympathy for Gen Z because they're just having much less sex than previous generations for a bunch of reasons, right? The culture is different in technology and all kinds of stuff. And, so I just genuinely, not blaming anyone, just feeling sympathy for younger people. And I got a lot of really good feedback from that video, and it was interesting. And one thing that stuck out to me is the fact that for a lot of young men, and women too, but especially more conservative types, socially conservative types and right-wing types and stuff, life is so much more difficult for them because they want to have children one day and they want a wife who is a virgin. So they don't get to have a lot of frequent sex necessarily because most of them are waiting and they have these very high standards. So they need a partner that makes a certain amount of money and has a certain amount of various things going on. And this is contrasted with like the way it was when I was young. It's weird because we're more socially liberal now than we've ever been. Like society is more tolerant of sex, but my generation and the Gen X and the baby boomers were even having more sex than the millennials, and they were supposed to be in an even more conservative environment. So that's interesting, just to see how human behavior patterns are changing in the West and stuff like that. And for me, like when I was young, I just figured I wanted kids maybe one day in the future. But when I was like 20 years old, for example, I had a girlfriend and we thought we were in love. Well, I guess we were in love. So we just figured, let's have lots of sex and it doesn't matter. We're going to get married one day anyway and stuff. And that was a pretty common attitude for young people. And then, today it's different because for a bunch of reasons. So anyway, what I'm really getting at, what I'm curious is, a lot of men, there's this thing called the male loneliness epidemic going on, and I think that a lot of right-wing politics, if you look at what's going on in the States, especially right now with the rise of the Christian nationalist movement and the MAGA movement and everything, I do think that a huge part of what's driving the conservative right in the States is bitter men or resentful men, basically men who can't get a partner and are resentful towards women about that, and they blame women. And it's funny because so many people, older people, ask younger people why they're not married. Like Tucker Carlson asked Nick Fuentes that recently, and Fuentes went off on this ramble about how women suck and, educated women are just terrible and hoflation and all this and that. And I just think the whole conversation is weird because the real issue for most people is they can't afford it. So it's like a non-start of a conversation. Like me, for example, I'm older and I don't have kids and I don't want kids. But it doesn't really matter anyway because I never had the option. I can't afford them, not even close to being able to afford them. I can barely keep my own self afloat, and the idea of like creating another life and like that I would genuinely love, and then being responsible for feeding it and housing it and all this stuff, I literally cannot do that. It's not an option. So the choice was just made for me by the economy. And keep in mind that I don't have a criminal record or anything like that. I'm clean cut, I'm smart, I have multiple degrees, and I can't even get a job at Dollarama because of the economy, right? So the economy's cooked. So I have this question, and really what I want to ask, I want to ask pro-capitalist people this, that are lonely, that want a relationship but can't afford it, because a lot of, young men are expressing that now that women are educated and they can have their own careers, they're making money. But sort of interestingly, a lot of even those women still want a man that makes like equal to them or more. So then the men are complaining that it's just too expensive to have a relationship these days. And to be fair, with the economy the way it is in 2026, by definition, the majority of men cannot afford a relationship or kids. I find this very funny because I am not a capitalist at all. And nobody seems to be talking about the fact that capitalism has screwed them. It's always, Jewish propaganda or something else that's affected women, and that's playing into it. But the real conversation is like, unless we all collectively fix this economy, most right-wing men are just not going to be able to afford the type of relationship that they want, and then they're going to be lonely forever, and then they're going to be angry about it, and then they're going to make it everyone else's problem. And I'm just curious, and I'm not being like rhetorical about this. I'm hoping that people will leave it, will explain to me in my comment section what the mentality here is, because I'm genuinely curious. Like the more I've learned, the more I take certain things for granted. Sometimes I stop and I'm like, what are these like pro-capitalist people, like Gen Z pro-capitalist men who also want like a relationship one day? Like, what is the logic here? Capitalism is, of course, a type of system that's not sustainable. It requires infinite growth and on, and eventually just, if you think about it logically, as Marx pointed out, everything that he pointed out is coming true. It just turns into an oligarchy. You know, the wealth monopolizes, and then you end up having concentrations of wealth in small amounts of people, and most people have no money, and then you kind of transition into oligarchy. Now, I'm of the opinion we've been living in an oligarchy since around 2008, when the financial crisis happened and the government bailed out all these irresponsible bankers. And I'm always fascinated by this because, you know, the government can never help the poor. 40 million Americans are about to have their SNAP benefits cut off. Most of those people are working, by the way, and the majority of the people that rely on those are kids. So the government's kind of like starving kids in the United States. But there's always money to bail out bankers and bail out banks and send it to Israel and all this other stuff. So I don't believe that the money's not there. It's just a matter of priorities. And I cannot for the life of me figure out like why people are still like pro-capitalist at this point, other than the fact that when you're talking about economics, economics becomes a religion for people. I mean, not formally where they think of it as like, this is my religion on like a government form, but the psychology behind it is, when people debate a lot of economic stuff, usually, unless they're a very sophisticated person or an academic or like someone's a bit more refined, what they're really doing is just having a religious argument because their own mind is rationalizing something that they need. Obviously, if you're a wealthy person already, you're naturally going to double down on defending the system because you're at the top of this pyramid. But for everybody at the bottom, if you actually understand capitalism and its flaws and the problems with it, I have no idea why you would still be like supporting such a system, because it's not in your own interest, you know. And one of the biggest agenda I guess I have with this channel now is just trying to raise class consciousness. I think all of the manufactured culture war was manufactured by the upper class capitalists to distract people from developing a class consciousness after the 2008 crisis, and I think it worked really, really well. It's got all, by funding leftists, obnoxious far leftists, and all the astroturfing, all the right-wing stuff, they just were able to turn men against women, make racial problems, all this stuff, keep all the lower peasants fighting amongst themselves, where the rich people just keep sucking up money. And I see us, like, unless we actually, everyone comes together, working class, and unites, and we have like a type of revolution, we're kind of cooked. We're just going to end up in a Blade Runner scenario. Now, I don't personally have a big problem with this because I want to just have a partner, find a woman who's sophisticated, and then we just grow old together, being happy and traveling. And a lot of people get mad at dinks. That's why they don't like gay couples either, because they don't have kids and then they have more extra money, and so they spend their time having fun, enjoying each other's company and traveling and stuff like that, while other people are constantly like working and stressed out trying to pay for their kids, and then they try to tell everyone that you're supposed to be having kids and you'll regret it and this and that. But really, the truth is that misery loves company, and those people are mostly miserable, and they just want to see these happy people. They'd be happier if everybody else had kids. It's the same way that people, like right-wingers who didn't take the vaccine, were always saying, everyone else just wants us to take it so they feel better. But it's the same thing with you guys, you want everyone to have kids, right? It's just because a lot of you have it. And for me, the other problem is not just that I can't afford it, but there's ethical issues with it. I wouldn't, even if I could afford it, I personally wouldn't want to bring kids into this world. The culture sucks and all these other things. And of course, nobody can consent to being born. So when two adults come together and they use their free will to create life, the life that the person that they're making has no control over this. They can't consent to it. They're just being birthed into an environment, and they have to kind of live in whatever they're birthed into. So I personally think it's very unethical and immoral to actually produce children unless you know that you can give them a good life. And I think a lot of people are kind of like phenomenally conscious, and they're not really meta-conscious, so they don't really care about what actually happens to the kid after they're gone. It's more of a status symbol and a cultural thing that they need and stuff like that. So, I'm not as stressed out as other people, but a lot of young people are upset because they want a trad wife and they want to have kids and all this other stuff, but they just can't afford it because, it's more expensive to have a relationship and stuff. So again, my question is, I want someone to answer in my comments section, explain to me the mindset of pro-capitalist young people who double down on this system of capitalism when it already isn't working in their favor and not helping them get what they want out of life, which is a family. I'm really, really curious about what the mindset is with that. And if you understand how the economy has been going downhill consistently for year after year for decades. If you're going to have a kid in the near future, what do you think the future is going to be like 10 years from now, if it's already cooked as it is now? We're living in Canada, we're living under state capitalism. So that means that the state and the private sector, which are not mutually exclusive, actually work together, and the government works to bring in a lot of temporary foreign workers so that the employer class here in Canada can hire those foreign workers for cheaper than local people like me, for example. And this is all just, aspects of corruption and greed and late stage capitalism, which should be easy to predict if you understand how these systems work. So I think that we all need to develop a class consciousness and have a revolution and fix the system. And then suddenly life and relationships and everything would become affordable for normal people again. And then these angry, bitter young men won't have to be bitter anymore. And then they can just sort of maybe pursue what they want. So I'm not being rhetorical here. I'm really asking for feedback from people to explain to me the mindset of people who are still supporting capitalism, but are also frustrated at not being able to afford having a family. Like, what is the mindset? Do you guys think that the economy is going to get better soon? That if we just got rid of all the socialists and left-wing politicians, everything would thrive in the free market? Is that what you're thinking? Or like, do you think that if you have a kid soon, that 15 years from now, the world and the culture is still going to be a great place, and the kid would enjoy living here? Or like, what is the mindset? So these are some thoughts I have of my own, as well as like asking you guys for feedback. So please leave comments and let me know what you guys think, and then I'll follow up with the next video. So thanks again to everyone who watched the last video, and I got a bunch of new subscribers out of that. If you didn't see it, please check it out. It was called I Feel Deep Sympathy for Gen Z Having Less Sex. And also thanks for everyone that left me comments about I look pretty good for 39, so a lot of people kind of underestimate me when I'm talking because they think I'm Gen Z, but I am an older guy, and I appreciate all the comments in the last video. So anyway, thanks for watching this, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.